So let's take a look at what the global media is discussing today. We begin with the front page of The Times. It's got a photo of Boris Johnson and his partner Carrie Symonds together because they hosted their first public engagement in Downing Street. But the lead story is looking at the US, saying it will enthusiastically back a no-deal Brexit and work with the UK on sector-by-sector trade agreements. Now on to the South China Morning Post and looking at the chaotic scenes as thousands of anti-government protesters crippled Hong Kong's international airport. That was happening this time yesterday. It was brought to a standstill. So the airport, as we said, is now open again. Hundreds of flights, though, were either cancelled. There's lots of delays as well. Financial Times is looking at on its front page is the use of facial recognition technology in security cameras in King's Cross area. That's in central London. The paper says the developer for the site claims the cameras are for public security, but would not confirm how long facial recognition has been active there. Ministers in the UK are calling for a ban on all mobile phone use while driving. Reports say that MPs will warn that hands-free kits create the same risks as actually holding a phone in terms of distraction. Many of you have been in touch on this story, so we'll talk about your comments on that one. And then finally, we've got the Metro, which has the story on a university banning the sale of burgers on campus to help tackle global warming. That is beef burgers. This is Goldsmiths University in London saying it will remove all beef products from canteens and shops next month, thanks to pressure from students who want to make a difference. Stephanie's back, as promised, independent analyst and expert on facial recognition, so great to have you with us today. So let's start with this front page story. I mean, we've already talked about it to a degree. A picture of Boris Johnson and Carrie Symonds hosting an event in Downing Street for the first time together, but it really focuses on John Bolton, their discussions, and of course what this means going forward in terms of trade deals for the UK. In many ways, it was music to the ears of the new Prime Minister, wasn't it? It's just the message he wants to get out there. We're first in the queue. We will get these trade deals. It'll all be OK if we leave without a deal, if we leave the EU without a deal on the 31st of October.
Yes. And if anything, I think we have to be really careful because President Trump has a history of reneging on things that he has said in public, particularly with world leaders. So all we have to do is think about his very close bromance with the French President Emmanuel Macron and how that has soured. He began very well with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That has become quite difficult. So I would just say we have to, this is great, it's promising for UK-US relations, but note of caution based on past behaviour. And
what we discussed earlier, which is quite interesting, is how John Bolton was talking about the fact that we can do it bit by bit. Therefore, we can avoid the issues that are tricky, like the National Health Service, if that's up for grabs, like Huawei, and if Huawei's involved in 5G infrastructure in the UK, those kind of issues. Yeah. But we can compartmentalise things so we can get some quick wins, as you said.
Well, even on something like that, though, we must challenge it because, for instance, on the Huawei decision, if the United Kingdom decides not to have Huawei in the 5G network, that would actually involve it ripping it out of the 3G and 4G network where it is already very present. That is going to cost this country billions of pounds. It would set the country back several years on developing its 5G capability, all in order to continue its intelligence sharing relationship with the United States. So that might be worth it on that hand, but there's going to be a cost for this country being ready for 5G. Who's going to pay for that? Right? So
and already we have 5G operating, don't we, in some cities
exactly.
like Birmingham. Is that using Huawei tech or not?
Some of it will be, yes. Yes.
So it's already in existence?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is, we define quick win creatively in these conversations.
All right. Well, let's now move on to South China Morning Post and the analysis there bringing on the airport chaos. It says airport chaos raises the stakes. And it's quite interesting. I was reading an article that Bloomberg wrote about this as well, and how the level of disruption that caused was not a game changer, but shifted it in terms of the impact on Hong Kong, business as usual. Because some analysts that I've talked to about this and the impact on the economy, on businesses in Hong Kong, etc., are saying actually 10 weeks sounds like a long time. It's very much in our faces every day on the news, but it isn't in the grand scheme of things in terms of Hong Kong's history and going forward. But then when you saw the level of chaos yesterday, you kind of thought, hang on a second, maybe this could have a long-term impact.
And also, will China allow this to continue? I mean, where does this end? How do we walk this back to something that looks like normal again? Does this mean that Carrie Lam would have to step down? Does this mean that we could see some sort of disciplinary crackdown? You know, we wouldn't want to speculate, obviously, as to where that could go, but I think our imaginations will all go to the same place based on precedents. This is the 30th anniversary year of Tiananmen Square. Will we see this tolerated?
Well, that's the big question, and that's the unknown, and that's what many are worried about, what might happen going forward if this does continue. And what's interesting as well is, of course, you know, Hong Kong was seen as the mode of access to China, mainland China, and to the other many thriving economies in that part of the world. And other economies, other countries are positioning themselves to scoop up what's available, where people think twice maybe about doing business in Hong Kong, but also tourism as well is such a big part of the economy. And many are coming from mainland China traditionally to Hong Kong to shop.
Indeed. And how will other countries react to this? So if things were to go really bad, that's going to force other countries to come out either in favor of the protesters and some of their views on democracy, for instance, and freedom. We saw a quite provocative photo yesterday of several demonstrators waving the American flag, for instance. Will the United States say nothing? That's like not a very neutral thing to do. So I think one to watch.
The flag carrier, Cathay Pacific as well, had to lay off a pilot and also 2 other workers who were publicly supporting the protesters, and that was seen as a move on the part of, you know, the Chinese authorities saying to Hong Kong, Cathay Pacific, this is not tolerated.
Yep.
So we shall see. Financial Times. Let's talk about this story that you're an absolute expert in. You're doing lots of research into this. The use of facial recognition technology in the UK. This is a really interesting story about this huge development at King's Cross in central London. And they've been using it for quite some time. Yes. And it's not clear why.
Well, there's so many questions about this. We don't know how long they've been using it for. We don't know how many cameras they have. We don't know why they are using it. It's of questionable legality. Just because something is forbidden doesn't mean that it's legal. And in fact, this country is actually in the midst of a real debate. There's a legal challenge at the moment as to whether or not even the police can use facial recognition technology. So for private companies to start rolling this out and basically policing everybody, tracking them in real time and comparing them against police watch lists is very chilling indeed.
And they're saying they're doing it to keep people secure. It's just basically like CCTV, but the next step. The worry, though, about this technology is it makes mistakes, especially some say it's racist.
Yeah. I would say it's biased and it's inaccurate. So right now, as it exists, this technology is extremely unreliable and doesn't really work on over half the population, which is to say anyone with darker skin, women, and children. So imagine that we get to a place where we actually finally fix that technical problem and it's a pretty accurate technology. That does not solve the social question of whether or not we want to become a surveillance society. Right? And it really isn't like CCTV. That's not really the way that we would think about it. It's more like DNA or fingerprints. Your face is a biometric. It is really powerful. And once I can identify you as you in real time, and because it's your face, I can do it without your knowledge. Whereas if I took your DNA or your fingerprints, you'd probably be aware of it. I can then link it to all of the other data that is known about you, your social media, your shopping habits, the geolocation on your phone that's tracking you everywhere you go, even here in the BBC right now. All of that is known, and that's going to be traded among third parties, the police, hackers, criminals, all of it. So we would expect to see an impact assessment for something like this. We would expect to see it communicated to the public. We would expect to see informed consent given, and there definitely should be signs. And I was there yesterday, there were no signs. And in fact, the security guards were instructed to film people who were asking about this. So that's a bit creepy.
So a lot more to come on that, and no doubt a look into what's going on there and why, and whether, you know, this is allowed or not. Hands-free car phone crackdown plan. This is MPs considering whether actually it's distracting, even though you're not using your hands, talking, devices, Bluetooth, blah, 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 linking with this, that and the other is really distracting for drivers and therefore dangerous. So many viewers have been in touch about this. Your thoughts?
I would like to see more research on this to know exactly precisely where it's distracting, because people talk in cars. If you're driving with children, if you're talking to whoever's in the passenger seat, what's the problem there? So is there a way that technologists could help with this to make the communication with the device more seamless? There's also the question of how on earth you would police a ban like this, which takes us back to surveillance technology. Smart cars are going to start listening and tracking the voices of drivers. Some of them already are capable of doing this. They can tell if you're tired, if you're drunk, and they can literally shut off the car.
Yeah.
So in terms of the question of how on earth would they even police this, that problem will be easily solved. The question is more, why is it a problem?
All right. Thanks you so much, Stephanie, for being with us. It's been fascinating.